Morning, Ralph. Morning, Sam.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Morning Sam, Morning Ralph.
And we're back.
Yeah, we're back. We are back after a short break. We're clocking in here today with a really cool guest. But first and foremost, how are you guys doing? What's happening?
Yeah, I just came back from the Prosper Forum up at the Amelia Island, Florida. What an absolute treat. Most of the shows we go to are more vendors selling stuff to people, right? And this was actually leaders from probably the top tier organizations, all the tier one food service organizations in the country, getting together just to talk about how they can make the world a better place. It wasn't about buying stuff. It wasn't anything about, hawking some goods or talking about EBITDA or profits. It was really, how do we include people? How do we make opportunities for people? How do we open up opportunities for women and people of color? It was really just something refreshing that reminded me that there's a lot more to this business than money.
Yeah, Prosper Forum does amazing things. It was really cool to get an invite there and doing some work with Paul Barron and the Restaurant Masterminds podcast.
Yeah.
It was a really nice way to represent. So good. Welcome back.
Yeah.
And Chad Horn.
I got sorry. Yeah, Pam and I got teased by the CEO of Yum Brands because everywhere they saw us, we were holding hands walking down the hallways. Like, oh, you two are so cute.
Oh, that's really precious. Chad, what's up, my man?
He's doing that. I'm getting ready for FS Tech. I'm sure our guest today is as well.
Yeah.
So much going on in preparation for that big show. It's been a lot of fun.
It is. FS Tech is massive. Let me talk a little bit about what we're going to, who we're going to be talking to and with today, what the topic is. Of course, as you would expect, we're staying in the restaurant technology vein. And today it's all about digital solutions for restaurants and what's hot, really. What are the trends? And today we have an awesome guest that's been at this for the better part of about 6 years as a senior editor of NRN. Her writings can be found in everywhere from the New York Times to the New York Post. She, as a senior editor of Nation's Restaurant News, covers everything from emerging technologies to major industry trends. Her finger is on the pulse of all of the latest digital solutions that are transforming restaurant operations. So please, let's welcome Joanna Fantozzi to our podcast. My goodness. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, well,
and I'm glad that we're starting off with talking about events that I know quite a bit about. My colleague, perhaps you saw my colleague Alicia Kelso at Prosper, and I will be at FS Tech. It's actually my company Informa's event, and so I will be actually moderating one of the sessions.
Wow.
Oh,
which session, just so we know?
It's actually one of the topics we'd wanted to talk about today. I'm moderating build versus buy.
Nice. That one of restaurant tech's closest, one of the closest tech topics to our hearts every day.
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting topic, and actually the enemy to a lot of what our tech companies talk about. Stop building stuff.
Exactly.
It seems like a really organic place to step off to. Why don't we go there, Joanna? What is that opinion? I've been doing this for a while. Paul, we were working at back office companies, and the moment we heard somebody go, we're going to build an inventory solution. Good luck with that. Because they have to maintain it. There's a lot of implications that happen down the road.
Yeah,
what's your experience with that?
I think that's the issue here. I think that there are a lot of pros and cons to building versus buying. I do think that in an ideal world, at least from an operator perspective, in an ideal world, you'd have a little bit of a mix of both. And I think that the building out an entire tech stack and building out your entire POS system is not something that everyone will be able to do. And so I don't think that tech vendors have to worry too much or hold their breath too much, because not everybody is Wingstop.
Yeah.
That's just and I think it's actually more unusual. And I think that's why it was such big news when Wingstop kind of did an about face with Olo. It's such big news because it's unusual.
Yeah.
And I think I wrote a story about that at the time, and also talked about other brands that were interested in delving into that world, like Yum Brands, RBI. There have been Sweet Green. And so there have been a couple of other brands that have done this, but none maybe quite as extensively. Subway is another one. So I think that it's more unusual to delve into that world 100%. both feet forward.
What's the driver for Wingstop on that? How do they justify that? Is it because they want more control of the guest experience in that handoff, or is it the money that changes place in that transaction? What do you think the real driver was there?
And
Well-
I think for them at the time, they had said that what they really wanted, and I think they still have this goal. Now, this was about a year ago, so hopefully they still have this goal, but they want to go to 100% digital transactions. And so they said that they want to be in the driver's seat. And actually, that's a phrase I've heard a few times from a few different brands. I
Yeah.
actually interviewed Marco's Pizza a few months ago about their proprietary POS system, and they use the same phrase. They want to be in the driver's seat. And that's, I think, what it's about. It's about not really quite finding exactly what you want off the shelf and
Yeah.
feeling like, and I especially think that this, and this obviously doesn't really apply to Wingstop, but I think that you'll see brands like pizza doing this a lot because you really want pizza specific, or I guess very specific solutions for your needs.
Right.
And that's really, I think, what it's about.
And that dovetails perfectly with that other article you wrote about Jeff's Bagels in Florida, right? There are only 7. It kind of surprising to me. There's only 7 units, and they're building their own tech stack.
That was such an interesting story. It was a little bit confusing to get to know exactly their history because it was an independently owned brand. They had a couple of locations, and it's New York style bagels in Orlando, Florida.
Ooh.
And I joked with them that they need that because Florida's bagels are notoriously bad as a New Yorker.
I live in Florida. Our bagels are terrible. I will attest to that.
So they tried to bring that New York style bagel, and then they were sold, and then basically the new owners, which was their major investor, which was the founder of You Break I Fix, and
Okay.
it's not a world that I'm in, so I was like, oh, I have heard of You Break I Fix. I didn't really think of that as being like but they are everywhere. But anyway, yeah, so from the get-go, they wanted to do proprietary technology stack. And I think, again, this is more unusual. They specifically saw the need for bagel shop specific solutions that they hadn't really seen out there. Like bagels are not like a lot of other food service in that they have to be hot and fresh, but you also don't want to end up with more at the end of the day because then you'll have to throw them out. Nobody wants a day old
Right.
bagel. And so they just are constantly coming out with this data and analytics to figure out exactly how many bagels they need to make, exactly how many bagels they have left in the back, how much more, let's say, that they need to make, and they're communicating with the front of the house. So the front of the house can see exactly there's 3 poppy seed bagel left or what have you.
Joanna, do you
And
think
so-
that with everything that AI is and promises to be, do you think that might be an impetus for some of these companies being a little bit more bolder in their choice to go ahead and try to build something versus buy something? I mean, it seems like AI could be,
Gives you all the framework.
it gives
right?
you
Like, help
where
accelerate
it
that,
gives you a
yeah.
kind of a head start. If you had the idea of creating this closed loop technology centered around,
Yeah, I think a lot of it, this is interesting because I do feel like a lot of the AI technology, specifically the software that we're seeing, right,
Right.
is the generative AI technology. A lot of times, I don't actually think I've ever asked this question, but what I feel like I should ask of any tech companies I'm talking to about this is, so the solution you're talking about is basically just generative AI, like ChatGPT
right?
plus some bells and whistles. And so I think that because AI is now this thing that anyone can access, that maybe, yeah, it's become something that you can possibly a tool you can use as a tool to build from scratch.
Right.
Yeah, or at least tells you the stops to make. Hey, I want to build a solution that does, I don't know, inventory. And it'll say, well, here are the following things it has to do. And even you could ask it in Python to write a version of that, rough draft it, right?
Oh, yes. To use AI to come up with the
to
ideas.
build these solutions. Yeah,
definitely.
that's where it's going. It seems like
No code.
Yeah.
No code.
No code AI. Yeah.
my background is deep in sales, and the thing that screams at me when I hear this is that when companies are doing this, they're not doing what? Everything else. They're building this thing, they're focusing on this thing, but they're not working on moving the needle on food. They're not engaging the customer. They're not doing so many other things. So it's an opportunity cost.
Yep. And that's
So what?
why I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, just the follow-up part is that the one you mentioned, the bagel company, that's an anomaly. They're very small. It feels like you have to be a very significant size to be able to break off that department to focus on the energy it takes to bring something to life like that and maintain it. Do you know Wingstop's an example because they're massive? Do you think there's a delta of where you should be as a business if you're entertaining that?
I think that's why it's unusual. This is why I say it's not like everybody's going to run ahead and be like,
Yeah.
I'm going to build my own tech stack. We're just going to have proprietary POS system. I don't think that this is going to be more unusual. I think that the Jeff's Bagel Run people are going to still be in the minority. That being said, I don't think there is a certain threshold you have to hit. Oh, you really can't build your own tech stack elements or POS system unless you hit 100 units. I don't think it really quite works that way, but I do think it's much easier if you are a Wingstop or if you are, let's say, a Domino's. Or even, like I said, they're not quite as big as those two, but the Marco's Pizza, that they have their own operating system. And so I do think it's easier when you have those resources. And if you don't, I think if you're a smaller brand, let's say 20 units and under, I think it's easier to be tech forward, but more on that buy side of things.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things, just to switch gears here for a second, is I wanted to talk a little bit about what we think, or what you think, and what you've seen in your journey thus far, that are some of the top technologies that are really making waves inside of restaurants. We keep seeing stats about 3/4 of operators say that technology gives them a competitive edge, but only around 10% or so think that the restaurant industry is actually leading the way. It still feels like we're a little bit behind some other industries. But what are we doing right? What are we knocking out of the park? And I'd be interested to hear anybody's opinion on this. Is there any technology out there right now that our industry can point to and be like, you know what, we're the gold standard in consumer? So
we're getting there, but I don't know.
I hate to stump the group
right now.
But delivery, listen, so delivery is something that is so incredibly complex. But yet, and with all of the problems that it has, all of the inherent problems with the so many different moving parts of getting a burger paid for, prepared, and handed off to the customer in a way in which it's still hot and fresh and on time and doesn't cost $1 million. I think that we should be able to look at this as a major step forward for the industry that's been able to put this together in a very short period of time. But there are some major challenges that have come with that innovation.
Yeah, I think when it comes to delivery, I would say that if you're going to be ranking companies or industries, I think that food service comes in at number 2, because I think that Amazon's number 1.
Yeah.
But okay, but I do think that you're right, that really delivery, even if it's imperfect, even if we get frustrated at the fact that from the consumer standpoint that you log in and you put together an order and then you're like, wait, why is it double? It's because of all these fees and whatnot. All of that aside, food delivery has become a part of our culture in a way that I don't think people anticipated.
Right.
And I think even a few years ago, people were saying, I wasn't, but people were saying that this was a pandemic era thing and that we're really not going to hear as much from the third-party delivery apps once the pandemic dies down.
Right.
And that's clearly not the case. And so I think that just for better or worse, even with all the challenges and issues that come along with it, I do think that third-party food delivery is incredibly important for the consumer and also for the operator.
Have you seen any kind of data that talks about the economic impact on delivery channels by merit of what the economy looks like? That people are saying there's not enough money going around, and clearly they're paying a premium for these items that are purely convenience. And eventually your wallet's going to dictate to you your buying habits, right? Has there been some kind of movement in that based on because we're all hearing economy all the time. Right. And I'm curious, is that something that's come across your desk?
Not specifically that, but I will say that it's just a little bit tangentially to that is we just put together a report for our latest issue on delivery, and it was based on mystery shopper data.
Yeah.
And so it was basically all these things that consumers are ranking and thinking about in terms of their delivery experience. And what I specifically focused on in my story, which we don't have to get into that much because it's a little bit more in the weeds, is comparing the three major delivery companies. But yes, one of the things that they spoke about was the prices and the menu prices and also the delivery and service fees.
Yeah.
And it was surprising to see some of that that some of the delivery companies just really had very high fees, and I do think that's something that people are seeing as more of a luxury.
Yeah.
I think that, again, I don't really have too much in the way of data to back this up, but I do think that third party delivery is a little bit more of a luxury right now because
Yeah.
it can
Our family does
double.
well, and we don't eat out anymore. We don't order in that much anymore just because it costs a lot.
It really does.
Yeah.
Oftentimes what my husband and I will do is we'll go through the process of putting together an order, and then we'll just be like, "You know what? Do they do takeout?"
Yeah.
Just call,
Yeah.
and we'll
Yeah.
just go and drive and pick it
Just
up.
go and pick it up. But yeah, but it's so funny because you look at all the different channels now for which a consumer can order their food, right? Well, you have the restaurant's own app, you have the third party delivery apps, you have, in some instances, you might still be able to phone in an order. You have a drive through, you have a kiosk in in the restaurant, you have the point of sale system in the restaurant. There's literally 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different channels for which you can order your food for a lot of restaurants. And that, I think, it's becoming more and more about the phone, essentially, as this the new POS? For example, we know that paying at the table is a huge, there's a huge segment of the population that wants more convenience inside the restaurant to pay for their food.
Yep.
I think I read something recently about First Watch has, there's something super simple. They basically have a QR code on the receipt.
Mhm.
So you're able to pay right at the table with a simple QR code. I just think it's really interesting. And I'd like to vibe on that for a second with regard to, does technology have to be complex?
No, it shouldn't be. It should
Shouldn't it be
never be
really
complex.
simple like that?
Wait, yeah. Technology should done well should almost be invisible.
Right.
Exactly.
Very good way of putting that, yeah. Yes, I think that tableside payment, I think, has a couple of ways you can do it. And one of which is, yes, that QR code payment, whether it's through the receipt or just maybe you download their app. And something that I've also seen some restaurants are offering is that you can, let's say, download an app or you scan the QR code, and then that's with you throughout your eating journey, right? So you can use it to order another round of drinks. You can use it to add a tip. You can use it to say, okay, I'm going to close out my tab.
Yeah.
So it's more interactive than your typical payment experience. The other thing, but really, I'm not seeing that, like, personally, I haven't experienced that as much. Really, what I'm seeing more in, just from a consumer perspective, is bringing that tableside that handheld POS
Yeah.
over, and everyone hates that because then you have to put in the tip in front of
them.
the server.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that is, again, it's definitely simplifies and feels really seamless, but awkward.
Absolutely.
It's awkward. That has to be improved there. Which, speaking of awkward, you have something now that is becoming, we're starting to see signs of it, and that's robotic kitchens and automation.
Mhm.
All right. So I think this is absolutely fascinating. So I'm in Boston, and I remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago walking through downtown Crossing in Boston, and this new restaurant opened up, and it was called Spice.
Oh yeah.
And Spice was, and you walk in, it was like maybe 10 blocks away from our building. It was nothing but kiosks where you order your food and then you just wait in line. And in front of you, you had all of these different robots with mixing bowls and creating these creations that, which I think were actually Jose Andres recipes. And they had one person behind the counter, which essentially took the stuff out of the robot and put it into a container and handed it to you. And it was like, this is crazy. And you remember this, and it was like, this has to happen. And I think like maybe 10 months later, Sweet Green came in and bought them. So we're now finally starting to see what the grand idea of this might be. Are we going to see more robots in the kitchen, Joanna? I guess this is a long way of getting there.
So yes and no. I think that when it comes to robotics, I have mixed feelings towards robotics because while I do think much like much like people, operators building their own POS systems, I think it's not for everyone. I think that 100% or mostly automation is not for everyone. And I think that, glad you mentioned Sweet Green, because their goal is to go 100% automated. And I think that most brands, that's great. I think that most brands won't do that. I think that I think that what's interesting is that in my research, what I've seen a lot of automation is in pizzerias. So I think that's interesting, is I think that's because it's assembly line style.
Yeah.
And that's where you're seeing a lot of the robotic technology. And then of course there's Flippy, Chippy, Dippy,
Flippy.
a
Yes.
lot of upper, a lot of
Flippy.
ippies.
Yeah.
And I think there's a fine line between novelty and actual usefulness. And when it comes to automation, I do think that, much like Michael was saying, is that the best automation for the largest percentage of operators will be invisible technology. And so automating things in the back that isn't going to be like a cute robot flipping burgers, or what is the robot on the floor that has like the kitten face?
Oh,
I don't remember which one. That
yeah.
might be Bear Robotics, but
I want to find that. What is it?
I've seen that.
I don't
I must
remember. I think it's
must
Bear
have that.
Robotics, or it's either
I
Bear
must
or
have that.
Voodoo, maybe. But yes, they have like the kitten face because I think it's a Japanese company, and it comes out and brings you your food. But I don't think, again, that's not going to be for everyone. I think what it will be most useful to operators is those invisible workhorses in the back of house, automating your financial bells and whistles and bits and pieces, things that people don't want to do.
Right.
Tallying your employee work hours and to figure out the best schedule. Things like that. And so I think that's where we're going to see more automation and less of the cool, fun robots.
I saw a barista not too long ago pass, I can't remember what airport, but it was like a very tightly compacted space, and it was a robot doing all the pouring, mixing, and grabbing things and dropping it off. And one, it had a nice effect for visual when people walk by to see this thing. But I think if in an economy of space, it actually makes sense that you could put somebody in like a Dutch Brothers coffee in a small footprint and really efficiently just start cranking out. But then you got to ask how much that device costs. Right? How much does it cost to maintain? And can we and should we always enters the question.
Yeah, I will never forget. And now this was now over a year and a half ago, so it's probably an outdated sentiment. But on the floor at the NAFM, I listened to a conversation between a couple of operators just walking past one of the giant. It was actually a barista or a bartender robot, maybe. And it was really big, and they just walked past and they were like, "This is cool, but why would this be useful for me?"
Yeah.
And this has always stuck with me because, like I said, there's a fine line between novelty / cool and actually useful and affordable for operators.
If you're using like a Chuck E. Cheese almost, like, hey, look at our robot fix your food, and that's the attraction, I guess.
Right.
This brings
there's that novelty.
A really interesting topic with regard to novelty, which this feels like a novelty at first until you actually use it and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And that is spatial AI. So there are companies out there right now that are utilizing spatial AI as tools inside of a restaurant. So for example, inventory counting and inventory management. Michael, we've seen this stuff firsthand.
Yeah, mind-blowing. You and I have both slogged around the concept of dated inventory that hasn't really largely changed since the Babylonians did cuneiform on clay tablets to mark down sheaves of wheat. The only difference is now it's digital, right? And new phones, modern iPhones, and new Android phones have LiDAR built in.
Now
Can do
LiDAR,
that, right? Yeah. Well, that's the anchoring part. So you marry LiDAR plus AI plus augmented reality, and now I can look at my inventory and just go, I just counted it.
Yeah.
That is an amazing utility, right?
No.
But it's some automation, but it's really piecing together the technology in a way that empowers our people to do the menial work less frequently, right? Just if they're going to do it, let's get them in and out fast so they could do the one thing we all care about, which is the guest service, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
I also like to add into that list of items there is Internet of Things, which I didn't know what it was a couple of years ago. It's a terrible name. Can we just agree on that? It's just,
it's not really
let's
internet.
lobby against that.
How about in-store technology that does stuff?
it's turning it all it is turning dumb things smart. And Internet of Things is just not.
Yeah.
It's not. Anyway,
my fridge is cold. My warmers are warm.
Yeah.
Right.
But that technology also goes hand in hand with the inventory management and all of the nerdy nitty-gritty stuff that a lot of your employees won't want to do anyway.
Yeah. No, actually, there's a utility somebody turned me on to recently, and I'd never even heard of it before. So a friend of mine has a radio show, and he's in like big restaurants, individual operators. He builds restaurants and for celebrities. He did Mick Fleetwood's restaurant in Hawaii. He's doing for John Cleese. Just really cool stuff, but things I never thought of. So he's talked about technology that moderates the volume of the radio playing in the place to make sure that the peaks and valleys of the conversations aren't too high, because the volume of the radio will dictate that. Marries that to the temperature of the room to keep the room optimal the entire time, to really make sure it's monitoring the entire guest experience. That is wild.
That is wild.
Ooh, I love that.
I mean, those are like
there are still voids in the industry that need to be filled.
Yeah, because great managers go, oh, I gotta get the thermostat, gotta turn the volume. This whole butterfly thing that a manager will have to do, and it actually can help regulate that atmosphere in a very optimized level.
It's amazing, right? And those are things that let's call it a spade here. Those are things you don't necessarily think about, but are so important to the dining experience, right? I want to be comfortable. I want to be able to hear the person I'm dining with, and I don't want to have to wear a sweater or a winter coat while I'm sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
Great stuff.
I'll just jump in, and we're going to be at FS Tech, all of us here, pretty soon, and we know AI is going to be a big topic. And this is probably firmly in that camp of not novelty, firmly in the camp that most operators will be using it in one way or another. And Joanna, I'm curious, like, how has this AI wave changed you in your role and how you approach the industry? Because you would remember before all that, and you'd remember what it's like now, where it's part of everything. What does that look like from your vantage point?
I hate to burst your bubble, but I will say, although I'm making myself sound less expertise than I am, but although I started at NRN in 2018, and I have been covering restaurants since I graduated grad school in 2012. I actually only have been covering technology for a few years because I started with being a jack of all trades, and then our former tech reporter left, and I filled her shoes. And so I feel like I've started when AI was starting. We grew up together.
Yeah, you guys are BFFs.
We are.
What a time to start! My God. Speaking of, we didn't even mention the redheaded stepchild in the room with blockchain. Chad, you're our resident. I'm going to put you, Chad, on the spot here. And Chad, our resident blockchain Web3 expert in the house. Here's something that I found that's really interesting. We actually have a client that's a major food distributor, and they also happen to be a Boar's Head distributor. And they recently had to go, if you've watched the news with the listeria outbreak in Boar's Head, it was crazy what was going on there, and just the turmoil that has caused everybody in that space to fulfill on the recall. One of the things, or one of the promises of blockchain is this concept of supply chain transparency. And Chad, oh my God, if this was ever a topic to nerd out on,
Yeah.
how do you, can we use technology like blockchain to actually ensure traceability on food from various vendors?
Yeah. So my take on that is absolutely, as long as it's easy. And with blockchain, that's the big caveat. And some people are figuring that out, how to make it easy enough relative so that the value you're getting plus the easiness, maybe if it's not as easy as it normally would be, but it's easy enough. Plus, it's way better in some ways because the blockchain does have a lot of benefits. But if it all adds up, sure. I think it's going to take a lot of time for that application and others to really mature.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's certainly,
it's definitely something that will happen inevitably.
it will. It's just, when you talk about tech, it touches on so many different facets of our industry, and certainly supply chain is a major area for everyone. And you can remember 10, 15 years ago, RFID was going to be the big solution. Never really got a firm grip.
I've never seen anybody roll it out in food successfully. The ones that want to keep getting stuck on the subject, and they keep saying it's too expensive.
Yeah.
Or hard to maintain.
Even though the tags are like less than a penny a pop, and you're still speaking Greek, I think, to so many people about it. So, you know what, guys, let's take a break right now, and when we get back, we want to ask Joanna about some misconceptions she might have seen inside the industry with our little segment called "Hate to Tell You But."
Hate to tell you, but.
Nice. Hate to tell you, but we'll be right back in a couple seconds.
Okay, God, let me have it. Popcorn.
All right, we're back with Joanna. And Joanna, we're going to talk about this segment we like to do called Hate to Tell You But. And we want you to share some misconceptions you've encountered in the industry that this is your chance to set the record straight. And what comes to mind? What do people need to reorient their thinking around?
Something that I'd been thinking about, which we touched on a little bit, but is that you really don't have to be a large chain or have several million dollars to invest in and be a good leader in technology in the food service space. You really can prioritize technology without building your own operating system or having a dedicated tech team. And I've seen it done, like we talked about the bagel shop, but there's also, I actually interviewed, this is a couple of years ago now, but a kebab chain that at the time they had 6 units and they had their own app. They had their own digital menu board. They had their own analytics, like the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
And I think that the key to being good at technology, but not being a giant organization with a dedicated tech team is prioritization from the get-go. It's easier to build something from scratch rather than to try and redo everything that you're trying to do. So ideally, you would be a tech-forward restaurant or food service company from day one. So it's that, and also simplicity. I think you don't have to have all the bells and whistles necessarily, but on the other hand, I feel like we associate mom and pop restaurants with the waitress with a notepad and a pencil behind her ear. You don't have to do that either.
Yeah. There is like core technology that I think almost every restaurant should have. If you had to call technologies table stakes, certainly the point of sale is one, the back office or the inventory management system is another. You would have to have some ways and means in which to have online ordering. I think nowadays you really got to be plugged in with a 3PO, right?
Yeah.
Monitor reviews probably is an important thing. if you're not measuring and improving, you're probably dying.
Yeah, you
Or-
got to
or-
be engaging with your guests, and if that means
Yes.
staying on top of your reputation. When you look at the growth in the industry, and so much sales now is coming from the digital channels, it's at least this guy's opinion that the tech that you need to concentrate on should be in that vein, because that's where the sales are coming in, and that's where all of the operations are centering themselves around. So any way to gain efficiencies, and should all be invisible, but any way in which you can gain efficiencies in that space, just to make those channels that are already very expensive a little bit more profitable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that maybe one thing that you don't have to check off your list is you're going to think it's surprising that I'm saying this, is an app. I think that lately everybody and their mother has an app. And I do think for a lot of smaller startups that is not necessarily the direction you want to go in. I'm going to use this as an example. Duck Donuts, which isn't a super tiny brand.
No.
Yeah.
I spoke with Betsy Ham, and she's super smart, and she was talking about how I think they used to have an app, but then they changed it to being like text-based loyalty. And it was probably a lot more efficient for them. And I can see how for an even smaller brand that it's a lot easier to do a text-based loyalty program, and maybe you'll have a mobile wallet application as well, and you don't have to have an app.
Well, I think app fatigue is a thing now, right? There's so many damn apps on our phones. Like I was literally trying to figure out how to unlock my front door remotely, and I had to surf because I couldn't remember the name of the app that the people that made my lock called it. It wasn't anything to say lock on it. I'm like, I gotta let my kid in the house. There's hundreds of apps on my phone.
It's like
hundreds. So how many more can you add on? I'm gonna have one little tile that has all my different restaurant loyalty apps inside that tile. That's a lot of noise.
There's another fatigue too that you guys have to be experiencing this. Like you remember years ago, it was like wallet fatigue, where you had every player's card in there, loyalty card.
George Costanza
Yeah,
wallet.
it was like
here,
a George Costanza wallet where you have like lower back pain from just sitting on your ass all day on that thing. And then it transferred now into app fatigue, where there's too many food apps. And now everybody's trying to figure out a way to, we got to, never mind the app. Let's get into the wallet. Let's get into the Apple Wallet. So right next to your CVS card and your Marriott Bonvoy card is your Starbucks, your Dunkin', your Jersey Mike. That's like the next space.
Another massive dimension of this, in the recent industry report that you shared with me, Paul, that put this in their key summary, and Joanna, I'd love your take, is how much do operators need to think about choosing their technologies based on their demographic that they serve, their consumer, their geography. How much variability is there in consumer appetite to
the
interact
coveted Gen Z?
Yeah.
Yeah. Forget about Gen Z. Gen Alpha is going to be coming of age.
Yeah.
Have money soon. Yeah, I definitely think that when it comes to, I'm not sure about other types of demographics, but I do think that age obviously takes into account a lot. I think that we did data recently. Oh my goodness, I think it might have been Technomic. I forget which data company it was, that just we talked to a baby boomer, millennial, Gen Z, etc., and they found that the older generations, boomers to a certain extent, Gen X, they don't want to deal with the digital technology at all. They're slow to
I'll bypass that kiosk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they'll just be like, oh, I'm not dealing with that app. I'll just pick up the phone.
Yep.
Yeah. Whereas, the younger you go, the more digitally native they are. So that's, I think, the most important demographic to take into account.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of the data is pointing towards the Gen Z folks, and forget about an Alpha, I would assume, would be going the same direction. As the social interaction is really not important to them. It's not so important that if they could order everything on their phone, sitting down at a full service restaurant and order everything from their phone, pay from their phone, like the whole bar taco experience, which they've got to be onto
Such
something,
a good
right?
brand.
It's got to be.
Oh,
I love their food, but but that seems to me like the perfect Gen Z type of experience where you walk in and you are the master of your own destiny.
Yeah, I definitely think that Bar Taco is doing it right when it comes to this. But yeah, I think that the younger gen speaking as a millennial, I probably prefer a little bit of both, which I guess makes sense kind of being in between the last non-digitally native
Yeah.
generation. So I think that I would probably want a little bit of both. I don't think I would just want to sit down and just order on my phone and basically never see anybody.
I mean, it's kind of sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, why are we even out? But hey, that's just the bitchy old Gen Xer here.
Hey, before we wrap up, Joanna, because I'm really curious, you work for a fantastic publication. What are the folks over there buzzing about that's coming out of the pipe? There's got to be some scuttlebutt internally, right? Outside of the
I
shiny
would
buttons, but
say
there's something big.
the thing that I feel pressure to be like the next big thing, but I feel like the thing we're talking about a lot right now, there's two things, is I touched on this a little bit before, but apps, I feel like we're just making jokes all the time about how I think we get 3 to 4 emails a week about how this or that company is doing a loyalty app makeover. It's usually not like they've never had an app before, it's
Right.
they're making over their app. And I always think it's funny that I get pitched like this like 3 or 4 times a week, and then I'm just like, I can't write about all of them.
Yeah.
And it's that we're talking about that a lot, and we're talking a lot about pricing.
Yeah. Are we over? Is everybody? I think I saw the headline not that long. Are we over dynamic pricing? Is that
Actually, what's interesting is that, yes, I saw that headline too. That was actually my colleague at our sister publication who wrote that a couple of days ago.
yeah?
Uh, and it was based on the fact that Juicer decided they were big on dynamic pricing and they decided to drop it. I
Yep.
actually spoke to this is a little bit of a preview, although I don't know when this is coming out, but
There's your teaser, folks.
I am going to be writing this next week after the Labor Day holiday. And I spoke to Ashwin Kamlani over at Juicer, and he said that yes, they're dropping that, but he does think that dynamic pricing has a role
Yeah.
in this. And here is my theory on this, and you heard this here first, is that my theory is that I think that dynamic pricing has a PR problem right now, and has been because of the whole Wendy's thing.
Yep.
And I think that we should instead call it variable pricing and pricing tools. And I think that in general, pricing tools are going to be maybe that's going to be the next big thing, because I think that I spoke to the folks at Juicer, they're focused on competitor pricing. That's also a different type of dynamic pricing because
Yeah.
it's pricing that
They'll respond,
yeah.
right?
But if
Yeah.
you're just not doing it based on time of day or traffic, you're doing that based on what the guy
You're
down the
learning.
street.
It's reactionary.
Exactly, it's reactionary. And then I also spoke with someone from a different app who said that they are working on a pricing tool that will be able to give you suggestions on what your menu price should be based on your supply chain costs.
Mm.
And so I think that variable pricing, as I'm calling it, is the new dynamic pricing, and it's an umbrella, more of an umbrella term, and more palatable to consumers.
And I'm with you on pricing tools. I think pricing tools is the right category. If we had to put it inside of a category, pricing tools, right? And
Yeah.
and every good business should understand their pricing and understand it well. So tools to help you do that. This has been an awesome conversation. Joanna, my goodness. Round of applause for Joanna, guys. Come on.
Thank
There you
you.
go. Little
Thank you for
smattering.
having me.
Give you a round of applause.
Yeah, round.
There you go. All right.
Is it okay if I tell your readers that they should come to our conference?
Absolutely.
As a matter of fact, yeah, thank you. This is where we say, Joanna, where can we learn more about you and find you on
Where are we gonna see you
Where
next?
will we see you next?
Yeah.
Well, you obviously should subscribe to the nrn.com newsletters, go to our website, and I have my tech tracker column that comes out monthly. I look at all the tech news and analysis of things that are happening that month. And then coming up in the fall, the thing that you can see me at Create, our Create conference is in Nashville for the first time this year.
I want to go.
Sorry?
I want to go.
What's the date of that
It's
event?
Nashville. It's October 8th through 10th. We are going to have a lot more tech-focused things than we had in the past. So basically, Create is for emerging brands. We've kind of rebranded the conference over the years, and it's a lot of fun. We call it the anti-conference because it's more about the food and drink and fun and talking to people.
And music
Nice.
and Nashville.
Yes,
Oh
and
my
lots. I know
God.
we're gonna make.
If you don't have music in Nashville, you're wrong.
We're having a lot. I don't remember the band off the top of my head, but we are gonna have live country music at our conference at some point on the agenda.
I think that's great.
Well, Joanna, this has been absolutely fantastic. And so you're going to be at FS Tech coming up. You got Create coming up. Like they can find you on LinkedIn. They can find you at your website, Nason's Restaurant News, correct? Where else have we covered all the gambit, all the great ways to get to you and connect and engage?
Yes, I think so. You should check out our sister publication, Restaurant Hospitality, which covers more the independent space.
Beautiful.
Boom. Love it. Well, you've been a fantastic
Joanna
guest.
Fantozzi, thank you so much. We'll see you on the circuit.
Yeah. Morning, Ralph. Morning, Sam. We're clocking out. That's a wrap.
Clocking out, baby. See ya.